The night belongs to us. We will bathe in their blood and relish their screams.
Hi everybody, I'm Mark White. I am the former project lead and managing director for Southampton Vampire by Night. So in this video I would like to talk about what our games were going to be like, meaning when you as a player turned up to our game, what you should have expected or what you were going to receive. And there's going to be a lot of things in this that I'm probably going to just briefly explain and not go into too much detail. If there is something that you want me to go into more detail about, please say so in the comments and I'll try to make a video dedicated to give you some more insight into what that was about. So things changed with the project from the beginning and the end of what was going to happen at a game. So what I want to do is on this video I'm going to talk about the end of the project, what we are eventually going to do due to all of the issues that we had and the constraints, meaning the rule sets, how we were trying to make a V5 LARP without any V5 rules, and yeah, so in the end, the final product that we were going to produce whilst we were on like a holding pattern until the V5 rules came out, was we were going to do a Nordic style V5 LARP. And what we were going to have was we were trying to give players over in the UK there's something called Secret Cinema, where you will turn up and you play a character, and basically you just kind of walk around and engage with actors that like we went to the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Stranger Things one, and there's things that you can get involved in, little quests, getting items, meeting some of the famous people that are kind of from the show but they're role playing with you like you're part of the world and that kind of thing. It's really cool. Live, I think you called it live theatre, is another version of it. You may have heard that from in your countries or something, but live theatre kind of, it's just an interactive kind of experience. So with that in mind, and with the Nordic style LARP rules, we were looking to do a game in which when you turned up, you had your personal goals and agenda, things you wished to try to achieve, and also, do you know what? As I'm, yeah, we're gonna redo this one. Cool. Hi everybody. I'm Mark White. I'm the former project lead and managing director for Southampton Vampire by Night. So in this video, I would like to talk about basically the game, what you as a player would have received if everything had gone to plan, and why we did the things we were doing, and yeah, just generally, I'm gonna go through some things, some of which I'm going to kind of briefly talk about. So if I do briefly talk about a subject and you want some more information on it, please comment below asking for more detail. And what I'll do is I'll try to dedicate a video to talk about that in some more depth. But throughout this one, I'm going to kind of be as brief as possible, because there's a lot. When we're talking about the game, there'd have been a lot of elements in it. So, okay, let's just talk about then before you arrived at the game. So your player experience would have been that you would have had some time prior to the game with a member of the ref team that would have gone through your character creation with you to try and make your character as linked to the world as possible. So elements within the game world that your character would have some form of connection to. This we felt was incredibly important to anchor you to the game, and so you didn't get that kind of square peg round hole scenario where you've got I don't mean this nastily, but a special snowflake kind of character where you just don't fit in the game world and you stand out. What we wanted to try to do was to ensure that when you turned up at a game, your character felt like it should be there. So you would have that conversation. Then we would have had a personal conversation with you about what do they call it? I should have really thought about this word before talking about this. It's not the code of we would have talked about the code of conduct, but it's more to do with like your phobias, fears, things that you don't want to see, things that would upset you, all of that kind of stuff. And there's a word for it that now I'm thinking about it, I can't remember the word, but we'd have had a conversation like that with you. And we had this sheet that basically you can pick on it like green, amber and red. Green meaning you're perfectly fine with that subject matter, amber being that you're slightly uncomfortable with it, but it wouldn't really upset you, it would just make you uncomfortable, and then red being this is a subject matter that would genuinely upset me. And we go through that and basically we keep that on record, because the idea is when we are producing our plots and about to run that game, there will be a warning that will go out to all of the players to do with any themes within that night that may appear. Like when you're watching a TV show and you get this thing may contain sexual, reference to drug use, sexual violence, stuff like that. We were going to do that for our games. And what we could then do is, because we had a list of players, kind of what would upset them and stuff like that, if there were any particular themes that night that we knew would upset a few players, what we would do is we would then have something in place during the game to distract said player, take them away from it, or a ref would have a little chat and just say, look, I'll explain to you what's going on over there, but we're going to fade it to black, so you don't have to be involved, but your character could be there, etc., etc. And that way we eliminate beforehand and give pre-warning of any elements that were going to cause someone to get upset, because that's not what we wanted. So all of that information would have come from that ref meeting, that pre-game meeting with the refs, and I was adamant that was important. Now, and I think I've talked about in another video how the time constraint of that would have really caused us some issues, but I was adamant that had to stay in. So that would have been your player experience prior to the game. Plus, of course, you'd have been able to look at all the rules videos, and you would have had been introduced to the forums and etc. etc. Hopefully your new player experience would have been really good. You would have felt like you were part of a community, and that there was loads of people you could ask questions to, etc. 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 Right. Then, when you arrived at the game, there would have been two things that would have happened. One, you would have given... Sorry, I'm trying not to cough it. One, you would have been given a player pack. In that player pack would have been your blood pool, your willpower, a brief description of things that may have happened during your feeding, your item cards, etc., etc. All of which, except for the blood and willpower, would have been assigned asset codes so we could track them within the system. And that would have been presented to you as you came through the door. And then if it was your first game and you're all dressed up in your lovely character costume and the rest of it, we would have had a green screen and lighting rig set up so we could get some really nice pictures of your character, because these pictures would be used on the forum for both when your character is alive and if your character were to ever die, because we were going to keep a record of all of our dead characters. Kind of a record of all of our dead characters. It just, yeah. There was places on the forum where you could go look up your clan members, and they'd have pictures and stuff like that for them. So you could put like yeah. Anyway, that's where they're going to be used. So you'd have got your player pack, had your picture taken. There would have been a pre-game chat which we would have gone through all of the safety aspects of the venue we were in, fire escapes, muster points, certain things like don't touch this, don't take drinks here, intoxication rules, all of this kind of stuff would have all been discussed. We would have then gone over the kind of what we were going to be implementing. A lot of LARPs use this style of thing, but to do with basically if you ever felt uncomfortable or like hand gestures for what you could do. Basically, it's like green, amber, and red once again, but instead of turning around in mid-conversation and saying red, the idea being is you could use hand gestures to kind of go like, I'm enjoying this. You can really, if you want to, you can up your intensity of your role play, or, stay like it is, or I'm uncomfortable, please drop it down. This is in reference to, let's say you've got an argument going on between two Brouillard that are really heated and they're really like shouting at each other. Well, one of those people involved in that role play could be incredibly uncomfortable and feel incredibly threatened or whatever because of the loudness and the energy that's coming off of the other person. So this gives them an opportunity to say, wow, okay, calm it down a little bit, mate. I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable here. And that's what that's all about. So we would have had a hand gesture stroke kind of thing within the game that would have been discussed, and an example would have been given of it, so everybody can see. We'd have then pointed out all of the ref team, the members of the team that were there for medical purposes, and a safe location within the building, which is kind of like an out of character quiet zone where people could go to kind of calm themselves down or refocus or just generally take themselves away from the game if it was getting a bit much. And that area would have been highlighted, and people would know where to go. So then finally we would have just given another pre-warning of the themes of the evening, meaning if there was like sexual content, violent, that, but not worded like that. We'd have just said there are certain aspects of the game tonight that will include X, Y, and Z, and if there's anybody that has any concerns about this, they can come and see the ref team, etc. And then that would have been, as you walk through the door, your introduction to our game. Then the game itself would have been all about, as I called it, giving you a party. So I believe personally, when you go to a LARP, if there are elements of the game that are pre-planned, so Nordic style do this, they pre-plan a lot of the major events that take place during that game. And other LARPs that I've been to, the ref teams have pre-plan things that will take place. Let's say the security team is going to turn up at a certain time, the lights or the power's going to be cut at a certain time, or we're going to have a dance take place, or a live band, or a juggler, or whatever it is. There's going to be elements within that night that are pre-planned ahead of time to give players entertainment. Now, a lot of these are normally associated with plot. So a lot of people will go, right, okay, so to this plot tonight, I need these NPCs to turn up and deliver this letter, and I need this argument to take place, and I need this and I need that, because it's all to do with the plot. Well, we were scrapping that for this particular thing, which was all we were concerned about is the host of the evening, because vampires, when they get together, it's normally due to the fact that they've been brought together by someone who's hosting, were putting on a night's entertainment. And so, for example, if it was a Toreador, expect it to be filled with lots of art and music and, acting and all kinds of bits and bobs. So we would have got in, more than likely, we'd have looked at buskers and stuff like that and asked them to attend the game for, give them money towards it. We would have had people that were either ref team or other people we knew that were talented would turn up and make some artwork, or you get what I mean. There would have been stuff happening, and the idea was we were going to plan a party, meaning we were going to plan elements of the night that were going to take place that would give players entertainment, and we would scatter these things around the venue. So if you just turned up, you ignored all the plot and you just turned up, had a drink, and was watching, you would have had a good night because there would have been lots of elements for you to engage with. Stroke watch, enjoy, etc. So that was important. That was very important to me as well, because I've been to games, I've been to LARPs where I've turned up, I've missed the hooks for the plot, and then I've sat around for 3 hours just staring at a wall, not knowing what to do. Especially when a game like, although Vampire is very social, there's also a hierarchy and social structure to it, which means if your characters low down the pecking order, you can't just walk up to anybody and go, hey, what are you doing? Because it could get you into trouble. So yeah, there was that. So we had this party. That was the idea. Every game would have a theme and a party element that would go throughout the evening. We then also would have had members, I think it was either one or two NPCs that new players would be directed towards. That would be like the new player NPC, and they would have things for them to hand out, stroke get new players to do, to get them into the world and get them used to the plots and get them used to how to engage with other individuals and all of this kind of stuff. So that would have been for new players over there. And we would have then had the night's plots, and there was going to be, so there was always a meta plot running through every game. To do with a meta plot is basically like your overarching plot line. If you've ever watched a TV series like Supernatural, you will find that the boys were always there trying to track down, like at the start of the series anyway, they were trying to track down a demon or whatever it was that killed their mum, or they were looking to find their dad, and that was in relation to the thing that killed their mum, etc. So around that, you would have loads of, like, the episodes themselves would be about, we're going to go track down this scarecrow, or we're going to go and stop this doppelganger, or whatever it is. But there would be links in those episodes to the meta plot. That's basically what we were looking to do, is to create this overarching plot line. So that would be there in every one of our games. There'd be hints towards it. We then had, we split them into clan plots and just generic plot, and every clan at a game would have its own plot, and the idea with that may be that it causes multiple clans to come into competition with each other. An example that I used was pistol. So the Ventru clan have got hold of, or have the, no, is it Ventru? The Toreador have the pistol that was used to shoot Hardestadt, and they want to get rid, because they're after a particular memory stick that has some information on it that they know that the Ventru clan has. So they've made a deal to hand over the pistol for the memory stick at that particular night's court, and some of the players will be made aware of this. Now, the Nosferatu have found out about this transaction, and they really want the memory stick. So they're going to do what they can to try and get that memory stick off the Ventru clan. They're not too fussed about the pistol. The Bruyere, on the other hand, are very interested in getting their hands on that pistol, as they believe it belongs to them. So now you have 4 clans and 4 clan plots, in a way, that are all vying to try to get hold of certain things. And that would have been an example of clan plot. Sometimes the clan plot would have just been for your clan, and other times it would have been clan plot that involved you engaging with other clans. Then we would have had player plot. So we would have picked some players for that night that would have plot lines that would be orientated towards their characters. For example, a message from their sire, it could be whatever, stuff like that. But we would do it in a way where it may put players in contention with each other. For example, a player is receiving something from their sire, and another player has been informed that they need to find out what that something is, for example. these are spitballing off the top of my head, so I know the two plot lines examples I just give are quite similar, but that was the idea with those. So although it was a player plot for that player, it may have had elements of engagement for other players to get involved in it, either positive or negatively. And we would have made sure that there was exactly that. We would have just made it all negative for that player. We'd have put people that had wanted to positively help that player. Then, so you've got your player plot, you've got your party, you've got your clan plots, you've got your meta stroke world plot, and then the idea would be that we would put in just some plots. Now, the idea behind these is that they are then the plot lines that are there for that particular night. You know, why was the person hosting? What are they trying to do that evening? Is there something going on between them and somebody else? Or is there a secret room within the building that hides a dark secret or whatever? There would have been elements that would have been that night for the players to find out and get involved in. And then finally, the last element was that was all linked to the meta plot, the world plot, was we were having puzzles at the games. And the idea with these were that it was kind of like a reason why the players were in Southampton and what they were doing. It was all linked to this big overarching 3-year plot line. But the idea is that the players would have been given basically like puzzles in a way to solve, that when they solved it they got part of a map, and when they put all these pieces together it would have given them a location to kind of go to, and that would have taken them onto the second stage, which would have then led them down like more to interaction really with international players in unlocking certain areas so they can investigate them unintruded, and that would have then taken them to this final location, which is where the last open would take place. The idea behind all of it is basically it's all leading them towards a coffin. And in that coffin, they can basically, if they open it and they put a certain amount of blood into it, which, depending on how many of these puzzles they solve, depending on how much their blood is valued at. So somebody who's been heavily invested in this plot line will have a heavy vote or a larger vote than someone who hasn't really bothered with the plot line, but because it's the big open and the coffin's in front of all the players, gets to have a vote. But the players wouldn't know that. So the idea is that they would be voting towards stalling Gehenna or bringing it forwards. That was the kind of how we were going to do the end of the first chronicle, is literally that. It was either going to reduce the game down to 2 chronicles or keep it at 3. And it'd all be player choice. Now, how the player got more votes was they uncovered this plot and pushed it through, etc., etc., etc. And we were planning on making it very much like a following the breadcrumbs kind of thing. But yeah, that was the area that I was heavily invested when it came to the plotline writing. That was the thing that I was focused on, was these kind of puzzles and how they all linked, and how players would interact with them, and why basically players would be under a certain generation, and if you were under a certain generation you could see these puzzles, whilst if you were of a higher generation you couldn't, which is why the players were in Southampton, why the courts were established, etc., is because these powerful NPCs allowed it, because they realised that the thing that they were seeking, the reason why they couldn't find it, is due to the potency of their blood. So they were allowing these lesser generations in because they were able to see these clues, because that was the whole point of what Kane was saying about, I don't know this factually or whatever, but the law, my interpretation of is that Gehenna was brought about when the blood became so thin that it was then that's when it took place, if you see what I mean. That's what brought about Gehenna, when the blood became so thin. So my interpretation of that was that the thinner your blood became, the more likely you were to see these kind of clues, go down the rabbit hole, and then bring forth Gehenna. Yeah. So anyway, that was that. So tangent, rabbit hole, sorry. But yeah, so the idea being was, though, that when you as a player turned up to our game, you would have a really good kind of welcome beforehand, really good introduction to the court itself, and then loads of stuff to kind of get involved in. And from you on the outside looking in, you're probably thinking, that's an awful lot of work to be putting into one game, and how are you going to manage that and all of this kind of stuff? Well, we were doing that because the idea was we wanted to put the legwork in before the game launched. So we had these plot lines being written way ahead. We had the character interactions, and also that we believed that you don't have to write out reams and reams and reams and reams of documentation to make a plot. All you need is a plan for a start, a middle, and an end, and interactions and links to other things within your game world to make it feel like it's part of it. So, you know, it comes down to the fact that as long as you kind of pre-plan a lot of this stuff in advance and make sure that your game elements link together, writing plot is actually pretty easy. Especially when you have goals and agendas. So every single character in our game, from NPCs to player characters, would have clearly defined goals and agenda. Goal and agendas. The idea is the goal is there. This is your driving force behind why your player is turning up to a game, or why your NPC is there. Is their goal. Do they want to become Prince? Do they want to become a spy master? Do they want to uncover the mystery behind why their sire was killed? Do they want to find Golconda? Do they want to bring forth Gehenna? Do they want to find you don't want to commit diablerie and get lowest generation as possible? These are their goal. Agendas are things that are there to help move them towards that end goal, meaning they've had a discussion with the ref team and they've thought about it themselves, what would be fun for them. But it could be like, for example, Spy Master. An agenda for that could be to accrue boons from the members of station within the court. Another one could be to get blackmail information over members of the court. Another one could be to establish networks of individuals from other domains. Another one could be to build a spy network with the homeless or with high society within the local city. These kind of agendas, and then the idea being is that when they're at a game, you're being driven towards that end goal because you're trying to focus on achieving some of your agendas that night. So if you turn up to the game, you've enjoyed the plot, you've enjoyed the party stuff going on or whatever it is, but you've managed to squirrel away a couple of boons from members of this court, you're going towards your end goal. So you're achieving something. And our NPCs would also have these. And so a lot of the plot that would be established during a night, which players may think hours of work went into, is just an NPC trying to achieve one of their agendas. And what we were trying to do as well was we were making the NPCs were never allowed to be the protagonist, but they could facilitate others. So the idea behind that was that we always wanted the focus to be on players and the player experience. But to achieve that, we also wanted to make sure that players always had the potential for help and always had the potential for resistance. And that could be established via the NPCs. And it could be that a player assisting an NPC with one of their agendas could then help them reach their goal. So, for example, the Spy Master, it could be that one of the NPCs, one of their agendas, is they're trying to find out, I don't know, some information about the sheriff. They believe the sheriff has a dark secret, and so the Spy Master finds that information out, or finds something about the sheriff out. So they've now got that information themselves, but they've also now traded that information with the NPC for a boon. So they've got win-win. The player has now gained a boon over someone and some juicy information. And they were steered towards that juicy information by the NPC's agenda. So, yeah, that was how the games were going to run. We spent an awful lot of time painstakingly go through each of the NPC's goals and agendas and their links to each other. We looked over the court. We were splitting it into ref teams. So you would have like your plot refs, you'd have your party organizer, you would have your world ref, and the idea was that the world ref or world they would kind of oversee all of the other plots and stuff that were going on and have the final say in them, because they need to ensure that all of them in some way were kind of tied to the main storyline. But the idea was that the plot writing was never just put onto one person, spread across lots. Which also comes into one other point, which is sometimes players don't like plot writers. A particular plot writer just don't like the style, don't like the ideas, whatever it is. And if they're the only person writing plots for your game, well, you've just lost that as a player. So the idea for us was we were trying to spread the love across multiple people. And yet we could even have people remotely coming up with ideas, i.e. people from other countries that couldn't attend the LARP could also help by writing these plots and stuff like that. So there you go. That's what you would have expected at one of our games. We were close to achieving that. It seems like a lot of work, but when you actually get the infrastructure down correctly, it's not as much as you would think. It's actually less work than what a lot of people do, which is they come up with a really elaborate plot line for a game, and then some NPCs that would turn up at a certain time that will all be to do with this plot, and then they turn up to their game, they run that, and they find out that half the court just isn't interested, and they've spent ages working on something that isn't very well received, and then you've got nothing else to give your players. So our idea was give the players a buffet. Hopefully they'll enjoy at least something from the evening, and because of that we were hoping they'd come back. So there you go, that was the kind of ideas behind it. Hopefully I haven't gone off on too much of a tangent and waffled on, but that would have been your player experience. And keep forgetting, last thing that would happen before you leave the game, there would be a debrief. So as the game comes to an end, there'd be a debrief where we'd make sure that the players were given the opportunity to thank the ref team and the NPCs, because I personally believe now as a player and as someone who's run games that goes a long way. So that kind of thank you. We'd have then thanked our players for attending the game. We'd have taken back the player packs and they would have been put back in. We would have had time to go through and talk to players that needed a kind of a decompression stage to, so we don't get any bleed from our games. Bleed is where you basically take the emotions of your character back into the real world with you, or vice versa. You take your emotions and feelings from your out in the real world into the game. So we want to try and that's why you have that player brief at the start, and this is why you have the debrief at the end, and you give players a time to decompress before they walk back out. Then depending on what night it was and stuff like that, we would have had now lots of people do this, or lots of places I've been to will have a let's all turn up at the pub and talk about the game debrief session, where you get a mixture between refs and players. Now I'm not so keen on that, so what we were going to do is we were going to have our own little hour or so at the end of the game after we finished packing up and all the rest of it, where the ref team, NPCs, and all of that would get together, and we would have a drink and enjoy the company of each other, and that would have been ours. The players could get together and go to a pub and enjoy themselves, but we would ensure that this was somewhere that we would go together as a team to kind of go over the night. Now, the last thing that would take place is that anybody that was an NPC that evening would have a short document that they would fill in, which is basically just a way of capturing key information or key things that happened during that evening that then would be uploaded to that character's like asset code for future reference. So this way we wouldn't get to a point where a player had an interaction with an NPC that was really positive, and then a year later when that NPC returns and that player is still there, the NPC has no recollection or memory of that engagement. We want to make sure that we capture negative and positive things, so that way the player feels like they can genuinely have an impact in the game world. And that's done by a quick, this character, really friendly, really useful, great guy, blah, 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 would definitely utilise in future. That's it. Debrief. And yeah, that would have been it. That would have been a game. And it sucks that it never happened. It really sucks. I genuinely, to this day, really honestly wish that we'd have just had and demonstrated and showcased at least one game. Just so, you could have all seen how cool this would have all been and how it works. But, it doesn't work out that way sometimes. So, yeah. Advice. Where did it go wrong? It went wrong for this because too much time was dedicated to the wrong things. And also that we had too many major changes that had massive knock-on effects. Changing the rule system twice, changing the iteration once from from Met to V5 didn't help. And then basically spreading my team way too thin. We just didn't have the time because we were redoing stuff that we should have just done once. It was just badly. The project at the start was poorly planned, which meant towards the end when we started to really make massive, ticking off stuff, getting it done, it was too late. Yeah. If I redid it now, just sod social media, no need. I would have, rule system, whatever. The only reason we changed the rule system is because I was so hung up that we had to be relevant. We had to be what Paradox was promoting. Otherwise, we would be left in the dark. It doesn't matter. Do our thing. Fuck. Yeah. Social media. Fuck. That was one of the major things that screwed us. Had so many knock-ons. Trying to make things international. Yeah, granted that was important because of the funding for it and longevity of the project, but still, that could have been added after. It didn't have to be the forefront. what I should have done is just focused on the game itself. All the elements I've talked about in this video, if I'd have just focused solely on them, solely on that, nothing else, no videos, no, fancy forums, no, just the basics, we could have launched this. Everybody could have seen how cool it was. And then from that, we could grow. We could develop. It's hard making these videos. It just brings back epic mistakes that I made. Thinking that they were the right thing to do. Thinking that was what you wanted. Was what the community... This is what I need to do. This is what is required. This is... And it's not. Fuck. But still... hopefully somebody else watching these videos, getting this far, congratulations. Thank you very much for watching it as far into the videos you have. Hopefully somebody watching this will be inspired by it. Go, do you know what? That was a cool idea, Mark. I'm going to invest into that, into my project. And thank you for warning me about the stuff that isn't necessary. And hopefully you make an awesome LARP. And you're celebrated, and yeah, it's like they say, you plant a tree not for yourself but for others. I'd have loved to have seen my tree. I'd have loved to have sat underneath it and just enjoyed. But it doesn't matter. Maybe it was just, this was me planting a tree for somebody else. Maybe that's what this videos are about. I don't know. But still, like I say, hopefully you've all enjoyed this. Hopefully you've got some learnings. And I love you all.